There comes a quiet moment when something inside you changes. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. You begin to notice things you once tolerated now feel impossible to ignore. Conversations that once drained you now feel heavier. Patterns you once explained away now look painfully obvious. And in that moment, you realize something unsettling. You haven't just seen the toxic dynamic, you've outgrown it.
Toxic dynamics survive on one thing: unconscious participation. Not weakness, not stupidity, just lack of awareness. For years, you may have played a role in a pattern you didn't even realize existed. The peacekeeper, the over-explainer, the emotional caretaker. You thought you were being kind. You thought you were being patient. But toxic systems quietly depend on people who are willing to absorb discomfort to keep everything stable. And the moment you become aware of that, the entire structure begins to crack. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it.
Something else changes when you outgrow toxic dynamics. Your emotional reactions begin to shift. Things that once triggered guilt now trigger clarity. You stop asking, "Did I do something wrong?" And you begin asking, "Why is this pattern happening again?" This is a powerful turning point because toxic dynamics rely heavily on confusion. If someone can keep you second-guessing yourself, they maintain control of the situation. But self-awareness breaks that cycle. Suddenly, the manipulation feels predictable. The guilt trips feel rehearsed. The emotional pressure feels familiar. And familiarity removes the power it once had.
Outgrowing toxic dynamics can feel strangely lonely. Not because you've lost people, but because you've lost the version of yourself that used to tolerate those dynamics. The conversations feel different now. You notice the emotional patterns no one else seems to acknowledge. You start setting small boundaries, and suddenly the system reacts, sometimes with confusion, sometimes with anger, sometimes with subtle attempts to pull you back into your old role. Because when one person changes, the dynamic itself becomes unstable, and toxic systems often try to restore their original balance.
One of the hardest parts of this transition is the guilt. Even when you know something is unhealthy, walking away from it can feel wrong. You may hear thoughts like, "Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I should just let it go. Maybe I'm the one causing the problem now." But here's the truth many people eventually discover. The moment you stop playing your role in a toxic dynamic, the system often labels you as the problem. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped participating in something that benefited others. And that can feel deeply uncomfortable, especially for people who value harmony. But something powerful eventually happens. Your reactions begin to quiet. Not because you suppressed your feelings, but because you understand the pattern. You stop trying to explain yourself to people who benefit from misunderstanding you. You stop trying to fix situations that require someone else to change. And most importantly, you stop internalizing dynamics that were never yours to carry. This is where emotional maturity begins to look very different from emotional reactivity. It looks calm. It looks quiet. It looks like detachment, not coldness, just clarity. Outgrowing toxic dynamics doesn't always involve dramatic endings. Sometimes it's much quieter than that. You simply stop engaging the way you once did. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly. You stop chasing understanding from people who refuse to give it. And eventually, the dynamic fades. Not because you forced it to end, but because the version of you that once sustained it no longer exists. And that quiet moment of realization may be the most powerful form of growth there is.